OK, a riddle for you. What connects China, US sanctions and Australian beef? Well, it turns out that it's calls for a probe into the origins of coronavirus. Caleb Maupin explains.
U.S. pressure on China is rising. Senator Graham, a longtime opponent of Beijing, has put forward the COVID-19 Accountability Act. This is a law that, if passed, would give Donald Trump the ability to put new sanctions on China.
I'm convinced that without Chinese Communist Party deception, the virus would not be here in the United States. China refuses to allow the international community to go into the Wuhan lab to investigate. They refuse to allow investigators to study how this outbreak started. This hard-hitting piece of legislation will sanction China until they cooperate with investigators.
China immediately spoke up, decrying the bill.
The bill introduced by several U.S. senators absolutely neglects facts. They want to start the investigation with a presumption of guilt, to shift their responsibility on China for the failure and incompetence in the fight against the epidemic. This is not possible. We express our resolute protest.
In my opinions, I think some senator of the United States sometimes like a paper tiger, and they just pretend to be a tiger and make Chinese scared. In fact, some of them, they don't need to hear the truth from the China. So I think the thing is very, very obvious. That is, nowadays in America, there are over 80,000 people die, and in the future there will be more. So this is truth. They failed to protect their people, and they want to shift the responsibilities. So that's why they just want to make China to be the scapegoat. And I think this is their political target.
Australia seems to be echoing the anti-China chorus coming from the United States. Down under, there are lots of calls for a probe into China. So far, the United States has only gotten warnings of retribution from Beijing. But Australia has already started to feel China's wrath. China has suspended beef imports from Australia. Plus, China is now threatening an 80% tariff on Australian barley imports. Both sides deny that the tensions are a factor in these dramatic trade moves.
Chinese customs found that multiple batches of beef products exported to China by certain Australian companies violated the inspection and quarantine agreed by Chinese and Australian authorities. In order to protect the health and safety of Chinese consumers, China has decided to suspend taking import declarations for meat products from 4 Australian companies.
I think we have to be careful not to draw lines between these two things. It's an anti-dumping issue from the Chinese perspective. They certainly haven't raised it as connected to any other issues, and I'd be extremely disappointed if it was. But there's no reason for me to think, based on the way that they're approaching it, that I could draw that conclusion.
The media has been quick to recall recent remarks from a Chinese official.
I think in the long term, if the mood is going from bad to worse, maybe ordinary people will say, why should we drink Australian wine or eat Australian beef?
Connection or not, China is Australia's largest export market. Jobs and livelihoods are on the line. Australia is calling for trade talks, as well as an investigation into the origins of the coronavirus. The media now accuses China of waging a trade war amid the pandemic. Now, Australian beef may simply not be up to Chinese standards. However, many interpret this as China reminding the world that it does not take accusations and sanctions lightly, and it's capable of striking back.
If China didn't stop the conflict with America, I think the world will become worse and worse. So that's why China keeps restraint. Australia is different. Australia-China relationship used to be very, very good. It's very disappointed for Chinese people because Australia push to promote United States policy. So that's why nowadays we just have to do something to respond.